In the glittering heart of Manhattan, where fortunes are made and loyalties are tested, Evelyn Moretti seemed to have the perfect life. She had a devoted husband, millionaire real estate magnate Thomas Moretti, a lavish penthouse on Fifth Avenue, and an unstoppable future. But when an unsigned letter arrived whispering of a clandestine affair, everything toppled faster than a stock market crash. The mistress replaced Evelyn in Thomas's will, shattering her world overnight. Yet Evelyn was not the kind of woman to curl up and vanish. Instead, she launched a daring plan to replace Thomas on every legal document he owned and claim her destiny. Evelyn Mendez Moretti grew up in a working-class neighborhood of Queens, New York, far from the glamour and privilege she would eventually come to know. From a young age, she was driven by a determination to build a life of comfort and respect. That resolve led her to excel in her studies, earn a scholarship to Columbia University, and graduate with a business degree. By the time she was 22, she had a small but sturdy professional network. It was at a real estate networking event that she met the charismatic, already successful Thomas Moretti. Thomas was everything Evelyn had dreamed of in a partner, confident, fiercely intelligent, and driven. Born into old money, Thomas had inherited a significant stake in the Moretti real estate empire, but he multiplied that fortune through a series of bold investments in commercial and residential developments across Manhattan. His name was known in socialite circles. His donations to philanthropic causes were widely publicized, and his presence commanded attention. Their courtship was swift. Within a year, Thomas proposed during a weekend in the Hamptons, presenting Evelyn with a ring so large it made headlines in a local gossip column. They married at St. Patrick's Cathedral with a reception at the plaza complete with crystal chandeliers, a 20-piece orchestra, and a guest list brimming with CEOs, socialites, and politicians. Evelyn, wearing a custom Vera Wang gown, believed she was stepping into a fairy tale she had scripted for herself. Fate rewarded her ambition with the perfect man and the perfect marriage. From the outside looking in, no one suspected trouble. Evelyn devoted time to charitable causes, most notably the Children's Hope Fund, while Thomas managed his booming real estate ventures. Their public appearances were orchestrated displays of wedded bliss, and the glossy tabloids photographed them as New York's darling power couple. Not once did Evelyn allow herself to believe that the entire world she was constructing could be demolished by a single betrayal. The trouble started with a single envelope slipped beneath the door of their opulent Fifth Avenue penthouse. Its surface was entirely blank, no postage, no return address. When Evelyn found it one morning as she was heading to her yoga class, she felt an odd quiver of anxiety. Inside was a folded piece of paper that read in neat type, "Ask him about Samantha Caldwell." 4 words so simple and unassuming, yet they triggered a sequence of thoughts Evelyn had long tried to banish. A swirl of scenarios, each more unsettling than the last, consumed her mind. At first, Evelyn tried to ignore it. She tucked the note in her purse, went to yoga, and forced herself to continue her day as usual. But the name wouldn't leave her alone. Samantha Caldwell. She could be anyone. A disgruntled employee, a secret business partner, or, as her darker suspicions suggested, a mistress. The question gnawed at her sense of trust. What if Thomas had secrets that night during dinner at Le Cirque? Evelyn wrestled with how to confront her husband. She studied his face across the candlelit table, the confident grin, the slight crease between his brows that formed whenever he was thinking about money or deals. She watched his eyes dart to his phone each time it vibrated with a new notification. For the first time in years, she felt uneasy in his presence. "Thomas," she began softly, hoping to quell the nervous trembling in her voice. "Who's Samantha Caldwell?" He froze, if only for a split second. His expression became unreadable, and his usually charming smile faltered. In that moment, despite the sophisticated swirl of Manhattan's elite all around them, Evelyn's world began to tilt on its axis. Thomas's reply was masterful in its evasion. "She's just a consultant I've been working with on a new project in Tribeca." He described Samantha as an interior design specialist, insisting the relationship was entirely professional. Yet the way he delivered those words, the subtle downward glance and slight shift in his seat, told Evelyn there was more he wasn't saying. In the days that followed, Evelyn found it impossible to rest. She felt ridiculous for doubting her husband, especially after so many seemingly blissful years, but her instincts wouldn't let her be. She decided to do her own investigating. Late at night, when Thomas was asleep, she searched his computer, scrolling through endless emails, project plans, and financial statements. She was savvy enough to look for hidden folders, cryptic email addresses, anything that would confirm or refute the swirling doubts in her mind. She discovered nothing conclusive, but the absence of any mention of Samantha was suspicious in itself. Thomas had countless business partners and consultants. They usually appeared in emails, invoices, or communications. Why was Samantha invisible? When confrontation seemed fruitless, Evelyn resorted to quiet observation. She watched how Thomas guarded his phone more closely, took private calls behind closed doors, and came home with the faintest scent of unfamiliar perfume. One night after he stepped out to meet a developer, she tailed him in a rented sedan, keeping a safe distance as he drove to a discreet brownstone in the Upper East Side. He remained inside for over an hour. Evelyn returned home shaken. For the first time, it dawned on her that her life could be unraveling. Whatever she found in that brownstone, whatever the truth about Samantha Caldwell was, she suspected it was more complicated and more devastating than she had ever feared. Determined to unearth the truth, Evelyn hired a private investigator named Marcus Holland. He came highly recommended by Marjorie Henderson, a friend of Evelyn's from her philanthropy circle, and a reputed attorney at the Archer Colin Friedman law firm. Marcus was an ex-NYPD detective with a grizzled demeanor that camouflaged a sharp intellect. When Evelyn explained her suspicions, he calmly took notes, asked a handful of clarifying questions, and promised results within a fortnight. In less than a week, Marcus delivered a manila folder thick with evidence. Evelyn felt her hands tremble as she opened it. There, in black and white photographs, was Thomas entering the same discreet brownstone she had followed him to. The pictures showed him there at least 3 times that week. Samantha Caldwell, a petite brunette with high cheekbones and a strikingly sophisticated wardrobe, greeted him at the door each time. But the damning piece of evidence came from financial records. Thomas had not only leased that brownstone in Samantha's name, but had also furnished it with purchases that could only be described as lavish. There were receipts for designer furniture artwork from Sotheby's and a monthly floral arrangement subscription. The pattern was undeniable and the sums were astronomical, more than just an occasional fling. This was a full-blown affair, complete with a second home. Stunned, Evelyn felt a wave of anger, heartbreak, and bitter humiliation. She had stood by Thomas for years, supporting his ambitions, crafting a spotless public image alongside him. Now it seemed he had replaced her in his life with Samantha. However, Evelyn had no intention of playing the scorned wife. She had power, knowledge, and a fierce will to protect what was hers. The first crack was visible, and she was determined to use it to her advantage. Evelyn debated confronting Thomas with the evidence outright, but ultimately decided to hold her cards close. She called Marjorie Henderson for a confidential legal consultation. Over a quiet lunch at the Carlisle, Evelyn placed the evidence on the table between them, her eyes steeling with grim resolve. Marjorie, an expert in estate planning and marital law, flipped through the photographs and the financial records. She let out a low whistle. "This is damning, Ev," she said. "If you ever filed for divorce, you'd have grounds for a substantial settlement. But is that what you really want?" Evelyn paused to consider the question. For all his flaws, Thomas had been part of her life for years. She had built her identity around being Mrs. Moretti, supporting Thomas's empire and hosting influential galas. Yet betrayal on this scale felt like a point of no return. "Marjorie," Evelyn said, "I need to know if Thomas has changed his will. I'm worried Samantha might be, well, the new beneficiary." Her voice trembled slightly. She hated admitting vulnerability, but the possibility gnawed at her. Marjorie nodded. "I can discreetly inquire. But I should warn you, Thomas has the right to change his will whenever he sees fit, as long as it complies with New York law." If he's replaced you, that's going to be ugly. But we can respond. We can challenge it." Evelyn felt a cold determination fill her chest. "Find out," she said, "and then we'll decide how to handle it." That afternoon, Marjorie made some calls, speaking in hushed tones with colleagues and connections at the surrogate's court. Within 2 days, she had confirmation. Thomas had indeed revised his will 6 months ago, naming Samantha Caldwell as the primary beneficiary of a large portion of his assets. Evelyn was scarcely mentioned. Evelyn stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls of the penthouse's master bedroom, feeling a swell of contempt and heartbreak that threatened to boil over. A legal filing from Archer, Cole and Friedman confirmed her darkest suspicion. Thomas had effectively cast her aside in favor of Samantha Caldwell. All the illusions of love, loyalty, respect shattered. Evelyn had worked alongside Thomas, meticulously building an empire and an image of a power couple. She recalled late nights spent strategizing marketing for his developments, hosting lavish parties to woo investors, and meticulously curating a brand that demanded citywide reverence. Now, with a few legal strokes, he had erased her from his future. For days, Evelyn avoided Thomas. She made excuses to stay out late, feigning charity galas or society events, anything to steer clear of him until she had a plan. But each passing hour amplified her rage. Why would he do this? Was it not enough that he had humiliated her with a public, if unacknowledged, affair? Had he genuinely intended to leave her with nothing, not even the dignity of her rightful place as his wife? One night, unable to contain her fury, Evelyn confronted Thomas in the penthouse. She brandished the legal documents like a weapon. "You replaced me, Thomas. For her," she spat, voice echoing off the marble floors. Thomas's face fell in shock, but he quickly rallied, retreating behind a veneer of calm. "How did you? This is ridiculous, Evelyn. It's not what it looks like." His attempt at an explanation was full of half-truths and fumbling justifications. He claimed Samantha was fragile, needed security. He insisted this was a temporary change, a safety net for Samantha, who came from a troubled background. But the will spoke for itself. In that moment, Evelyn realized if Thomas had replaced her so casually in his future, she would replace him here and now in everything he believed he controlled. After that fiery confrontation, the penthouse became a silent battleground. Thomas retreated to his home office while Evelyn found refuge in the guest suite, an arrangement that said everything about the state of their marriage. She could barely look at him without a sneer forming on her lips. Still, she made an effort to maintain appearances in public, not wanting to tip off the social circles or the press that there was trouble in paradise. With Marjorie's guidance, Evelyn began an in-depth review of all the legal documents tied to Thomas's real estate empire. She discovered that although he had changed his will, many other documents, partnership agreements, trust, deeds, powers of attorney had not yet been updated. Thomas had been careless in his attempt to shuffle her aside. Perhaps he assumed she would remain ignorant of his machinations. Evelyn made a decision: she would secure her future. If Thomas wanted Samantha to be the beneficiary of his estate, then Evelyn would ensure the estate itself came under her own control long before that eventuality could come to pass. Marjorie outlined a strategic approach: transfer or retitle assets where possible, revise corporate structures to create layers of protection and leverage any powers of attorney Thomas had ignorantly left in place. Her first order of business was to seize control of key assets. Through a corporate agreement from years ago, Evelyn still held a signatory right for certain Moretti Holdings subsidiary accounts. She exercised those rights, moving funds into a separate account under her own name. It was a risky move, but Evelyn was certain that if Thomas hadn't told her about Samantha, he wouldn't dare reveal this financial shuffle publicly. He would keep it quiet to avoid scandal, even if it meant losing capital. Every step Evelyn took was silent but deliberate, a way to ensure that when the final showdown arrived, she wouldn't be left powerless. In the world of high-stakes business, alliances and confidences often shift like sand in a windstorm. Evelyn knew she couldn't navigate this crisis alone. She needed support from people who understood corporate law, finances, and crucially the silent intricacies of Manhattan's elite circles. Her first confidant was, of course, Marjorie Henderson. The second was an old friend from Columbia, Dr. Alan Pierce, who had pivoted from a legal career to crisis management consulting for affluent clients. Alan's gift was strategy, a chess player who saw life through a lens of moves and countermoves. At a discreet cocktail bar near Central Park, Evelyn met with Marjorie and Alan, carefully relaying the entire twisted narrative. Alan, his piercing blue eyes fixed intently on Evelyn, laid out the necessity of forming a shadow coalition, a network of individuals discreetly loyal to Evelyn within Thomas's corporate structure. They would ensure vital information flowed to her first, and that any move Thomas made, like further revisions to share distributions or property titles, would be flagged immediately. Marjorie took notes, scribbling details on a yellow legal pad. She recommended obtaining up-to-date valuations on all of Thomas's major assets, from the Tribeca development projects to the Midtown skyscrapers. "If you know what everything is worth," she said, "you have a better chance of maneuvering legally." Alan suggested launching a whisper campaign, subtle hints to influential real estate moguls and bankers that Evelyn might be stepping into a more prominent role at Moretti Holdings. Not scandalous enough to damage the company's stocks, but sufficient to shift the balance of power in her favor. As the meeting concluded, Evelyn felt a renewed sense of determination. She had a plan, a team, and a fierce motivation. The sting of betrayal was fueling her. If Thomas thought he could rewrite their life's narrative, then he'd soon discover she was ready to pen a new ending, one that placed her firmly at the helm. While Evelyn plotted her counter-offensive, Samantha Caldwell began to assert her presence more openly. She appeared at social functions once strictly reserved for Evelyn, albeit always under the guise of a business associate. Whispers in the upper echelons of Manhattan society started circulating. Who was this Samantha Caldwell, and why did Thomas Moretti keep her so close? Some speculated she was merely a new developer in Moretti's stable of experts. Others suspected a deeper relationship. A handful of tabloids ran blind items about a mystery woman who had captured the attention of a powerful New York mogul. Thomas seemed unbothered by the rumors. He acted like a man who believed he controlled every aspect of his life. Even so, he maintained the charade at home, dancing around the reality of his crumbling marriage with Evelyn. He offered no apologies, nor did he attempt to rectify his will or legal documents. He lived in a suspended bubble of self-assurance, failing to notice the quiet machinations Evelyn set in motion. Emboldened by Thomas's attention, Samantha took liberties with corporate decisions. She showed up unannounced at Moretti Holdings board meetings dressed in immaculate designer suits, offering unsolicited opinions on everything from property acquisitions to marketing strategies. Some board members, suspecting she had Thomas's ear, carefully entertained her input. Others bristled at the intrusion, seeing Samantha's presence as an overreach. The tension was palpable, and it seeped through the company's ranks. Evelyn, observing from a distance, felt both seething anger and a curious sense of opportunity. Samantha's overconfidence could be the wedge Evelyn needed. If Samantha made a serious misstep, like meddling in deals without the appropriate authority, Evelyn could exploit that to undermine Thomas's credibility. The stage was set for a corporate tug-of-war, with Samantha blissfully unaware that Evelyn was methodically tightening her grip on the puppet strings. As Samantha extended her reach in Thomas's business affairs, Evelyn claimed quiet wins that went unnoticed by the public, but made a significant impact behind the scenes. Using her existing signatory rights, she authorized strategic reallocations of funds to personal holding companies she controlled. She restructured certain subsidiaries so that key assets, prime real estate with high yield potential, fell under her direct oversight. Whenever the bank or board demanded an explanation, Evelyn, still legally recognized as a senior executive and co-partner in Moretti Holdings, produced the requisite paperwork. The details were labyrinthine enough that most people in the hierarchy were none the wiser. Meanwhile, she discreetly cultivated relationships with members of the board. A few dinners here, a private conversation there, and soon she built a small alliance of influential voices. They weren't necessarily loyal to Evelyn on a personal level, but they respected her business acumen and recognized the instability Samantha's meddling might introduce. If a conflict came to a head, these aligned board members could make or break Thomas's leadership. On a personal level, these minor successes ignited a fire within Evelyn. She rediscovered the industrious spirit that had propelled her out of Queens through Columbia and into the heart of Manhattan's elite. Far from the naive young woman who once placed absolute trust in her husband, she was now a strategist focused, relentless, and poised to retaliate. Yet each victory also brought a pang of sorrow. She had never envisioned her marriage would decay into such subterfuge and betrayal. For all her newfound power, she still mourned the love she had lost. But whenever a flicker of regret surfaced, she reminded herself of Samantha's name splashed across the will, and the heartbreak hardened into resolve. In the battle for her future, Evelyn could not afford to yield. Complicating matters further was the presence of a 9-year-old boy at the center of this maelstrom. Daniel Moretti, the son Evelyn and Thomas had adopted when he was an infant. Daniel was bright, inquisitive, and gentle, a testament to the loving environment Evelyn had once believed defined their home. Now, with tension radiating through every corner of the penthouse, Daniel sensed something was amiss. Evelyn worked hard to shield him from the turmoil. She maintained a routine, helping him with homework, attending his soccer matches at the elite Dalton school, and reading him stories at bedtime. Yet Daniel wasn't oblivious. He saw his parents communicate through curt nods and terse words. He noticed how his father had grown distant and often absent in the evenings. One evening, as Evelyn tucked him into bed, Daniel asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, are you and Dad mad at each other?" His wide eyes brimming with worry, he confessed that Thomas had snapped at him for asking about Samantha, a name Daniel had overheard from a passing conversation. Caught off guard, Evelyn pressed her palm against Daniel's cheek. She assured him that everything would be fine, that he shouldn't worry about grown-up issues. But guilt tugged at her. Whatever war she and Thomas were waging, Daniel stood to lose if the conflict spiraled into a messy public showdown. The next day, Evelyn summoned Thomas to Daniel's bedroom. They stood in awkward silence, united only by their concern for the boy. Evelyn insisted that no matter what was happening between them, they had to protect Daniel from the ugly truth. Thomas nodded, clearly uncomfortable. In that fleeting moment, Evelyn saw a flicker of the man she used to love, concerned, thoughtful, paternal. She wondered if it was too little, too late. Having weathered snide looks and cautious acceptance from certain board members, Samantha Caldwell made a brazen move. She pitched a redevelopment plan for a historical building in Soho to the Moretti Holdings Board, naming herself as the lead project coordinator. It was an audacious power play, one typically reserved for senior executives with years of proven experience. Samantha, with no track record in large-scale redevelopment, was overstepping her bounds. The boardroom buzzed with tension as Samantha presented glossy slides referencing architectural sketches and revenue projections. She spoke authoritatively, as though the board would rubber stamp her ideas simply because Thomas Moretti stood at her side. Thomas, seated at the head of the table, offered polite nods but refrained from intervening. Perhaps he believed that indulging Samantha would keep her appeased. But the board members weren't blind. Some asked pointed questions about her qualifications. Others grilled her about the budget for structural renovations. Samantha faltered, her polished exterior cracking under scrutiny. Evelyn, who sat quietly near the back, recorded every moment of Samantha's fumbling performance. When the time came to vote on whether to move forward with the plan, Evelyn made her move. She raised concerns about potential zoning conflicts and historical preservation laws that Samantha's plan had overlooked. Several board members chimed in, siding with Evelyn's expertise. The motion was soundly rejected. Outside the boardroom, a furious Samantha cornered Evelyn in a corridor. "I know what you're doing," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "Thomas and I were not going anywhere. If you're trying to sabotage me, you'll fail." Evelyn stared back, unruffled. "This isn't about sabotage. It's about what's best for Moretti Holdings. If you can't see that, maybe you're in over your head." Beneath that calm tone, Evelyn felt a surge of triumph. Samantha had revealed a critical weakness, her ego. Thomas's anger erupted later that evening. He stormed into the penthouse, slamming the door behind him, eyes blazing at Evelyn. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "You embarrassed Samantha in front of the board." Evelyn cut him off, her voice as icy as his was hot. "She embarrassed herself, Thomas. Her proposal was fundamentally flawed, and you know it." He glared at her, pacing the marble foyer like a caged animal. "You're trying to undermine her. You want to destroy her position at Moretti Holdings just to get revenge on me." Evelyn held her ground, arms crossed over her chest. "You're mistaken. I'm protecting this company. I've spent years building it alongside you, and I'm not about to watch it collapse because your mistress has delusions of grandeur." "Don't call her that," Thomas snapped, but the guilt laced his voice. He took a step closer to Evelyn, an intimidation tactic that no longer worked on her. "Call it what it is," she replied, meeting his glare. "While we're at it, maybe I should call your lawyer too. Ask him why my name has been struck from your will." Thomas's expression shifted to panic. "You have no right to spy on my affairs." Evelyn offered a mirthless laugh. "No right? After everything I poured into this family, this business, you think I have no right? Look around, Thomas. You used to say I was your partner in everything. Now you've replaced me in your will for a woman you barely know. You can't expect me to bow my head and pretend it never happened." For a moment the fury in Thomas's eyes dimmed, replaced by something akin to regret. But it lasted only a second before his defenses rose again. "You've made your choice then," he said bitterly. "This is war." The morning after their heated confrontation, Evelyn awoke to find an envelope bearing the letterhead of Archer Cole and Friedman, Marjorie's firm. Inside, Marjorie informed her that Thomas had begun drafting official documents to remove Evelyn from certain corporate positions at Moretti Holdings. Evidently, Thomas felt threatened by Evelyn's newfound assertiveness. That same day, Evelyn received a second letter, this one from a separate law firm representing Samantha Caldwell. Samantha was alleging that Evelyn's interference at the board meeting constituted personal harassment and defamation against Samantha's professional reputation. While the accusations were weak at best, they signaled Samantha's resolve to fight back whatever the cost. Evelyn wasted no time. She convened an urgent meeting with Marjorie and Alan Pierce. Marjorie examined the documents carefully, her brow furrowing. "He can't just remove you from corporate positions without due process. You're a legal partner and you have contractual rights." Alan nodded. "And Samantha's claim is baseless. Let her go to court. It'll only expose her lack of qualifications. But be prepared. Thomas is going to come at you hard." Emboldened, Evelyn issued a formal response through Marjorie's office threatening legal action if Thomas attempted to remove her from any position without adhering to the partnership agreements. She also demanded a complete audit of Moretti Holdings to ensure no misappropriation of funds was taking place. It was a canny move designed to put Thomas on the defensive and subject his financial maneuvers, especially those benefiting Samantha, to greater scrutiny. By nightfall, the tension had escalated beyond personal animosity to a legitimate corporate battle. Thomas had thrown down the gauntlet and Evelyn had responded with equal ferocity. The lines were drawn, and with each passing day the possibility of a very public collapse loomed. But Evelyn refused to cower. She would fight to the end with every legal weapon at her disposal. One of the first casualties of this marital and corporate war was the carefully manicured public image of the Moretti family. Social media sites, gossip blogs, and even mainstream tabloids began chattering about the once golden couple. Although no official statements were released, the swirl of rumors, Samantha Caldwell's sudden appearance, Evelyn's rumored ousting from Moretti Holdings, seemed to confirm the stories of an impending split. Paparazzi congregated outside the penthouse, catching photographs of Evelyn and Thomas entering and leaving at separate times. Samantha, brazen as ever, was photographed walking hand in hand with Thomas through Central Park, fueling speculation that she was more than just a business associate. The negative press impacted Moretti Holdings' stock prices. Investors uncertain about the company's leadership began pulling out. Board members fretted over the instability, privately reaching out to Evelyn for assurance that she wouldn't let the situation spiral out of control. Evelyn felt torn. She didn't want the empire she had built to crumble, yet each of Thomas's moves and Samantha's opportunism escalated the likelihood of a meltdown. Nevertheless, there was one unexpected benefit to the public scrutiny. Supporters within the real estate industry who admired Evelyn's intellect and professionalism began reaching out, offering moral and even financial support. Some of them had disliked Thomas's arrogance for years. Seeing him entangled in scandal gave them an excuse to align with Evelyn. If she managed to wrest control from him, these players wanted to be on her good side. In a strategic move, Evelyn scheduled a press conference under the guise of a charitable initiative event. She used the platform to reaffirm her commitment to Moretti Holdings and to highlight upcoming projects she was leading. She made no mention of the marital discord yet. The subtext was clear. She was still here, still powerful, and not about to be sidelined. In the midst of the intensifying legal battles, Evelyn's investigator Marcus Holland contacted her with a new lead. "I've found something that might change everything," he said over the phone. His tone was unusually urgent. They met at a modest diner in Midtown to avoid prying eyes. Marcus slid a slim folder across the table. "I dug deeper into Samantha Caldwell's background beyond the surface-level stuff. She's not who she says she is." Evelyn opened the folder. Inside were documents tracing Samantha's history to multiple aliases. Samantha Caldwell was just one. She had a string of consultant roles in different states, each ending under suspicious circumstances. Financial records indicated she was adept at latching onto wealthy men, securing monetary gifts or settlements, and then vanishing. Her real name, it seemed, was Gillian Stanton, a woman with a rap sheet that included fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. At least 2 wealthy ex-partners had filed lawsuits against her, but she'd slipped away before any judgment could be enforced. If these documents were accurate, Thomas was in grave danger. He had entrusted not only his love, but a significant chunk of his fortune to a con artist. Evelyn stared at the photos included in the file, her shock tinged with a quiet sense of vindication. Samantha Caldwell, or Gillian Stanton, was no mere social climber. She was a professional grifter. The woman who had replaced Evelyn in Thomas's will was a career criminal. "Have you told Thomas?" Evelyn asked, her voice hushed. Marcus shook his head. "I figured you'd want to decide how to handle it. He might not believe me or you without proof." Evelyn exhaled, her mind racing. The revelation changed the game entirely. Samantha wasn't just a rival for Thomas's affection or business power. She was a predator who might destroy him if left unchecked. The question was, how could Evelyn turn this knowledge to her advantage? After poring over Marcus's file late into the night, Evelyn sat in the quiet of her study, fingers steepled under her chin. The chandelier above cast soft light over the damning documents, arrest records, former aliases, past lawsuits. Samantha Caldwell, or rather Gillian Stanton, wasn't just a scheming mistress. She was a professional con artist with a trail of devastated men and hollowed bank accounts behind her. Evelyn's pulse steadied. She now possessed the weapon that could end everything. At sunrise, she contacted Marjorie Henderson and Alan Pierce. Over coffee in Alan's Upper West Side apartment, the trio strategized. Evelyn handed them the folder. Alan's brows lifted with interest. "This woman is a walking liability. If even half of this gets out, Thomas could face shareholder lawsuits for negligence." Marjorie tapped her pen against her notepad. "We have 2 options. We either use this behind closed doors to negotiate her exit, or go nuclear." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I want it public. Not out of spite, though. Yes, I won't pretend I don't feel that, but because Thomas needs to see what she really is. And so does everyone else." Alan leaned back in his chair, studying Evelyn. "That means orchestrating a stage. Somewhere visible, respectable, and strategic. And Samantha won't go quietly. We need to catch her off guard." An idea bloomed in Evelyn's mind, the upcoming Children's Hope Fund fundraiser. It was a jewel in Manhattan's social calendar, and she was the co-chair. If Samantha dared to attend on Thomas's arm, Evelyn could unmask her there in front of the very crowd she'd tried so hard to charm. "That's the place," Evelyn said. The fundraiser at the Met. "We'll let her walk right into her own reckoning." Over the following days, Evelyn moved with surgical precision. She maintained a cold civility toward Thomas at home, even managing to appear conciliatory. For Daniel's sake, she murmured over dinner one evening, "Perhaps we should try to be more united, at least in public." Thomas, visibly weary, welcomed her change in tone. He interpreted it as Evelyn softening, perhaps even accepting Samantha's place in his life. That made him drop his guard exactly as she intended. Meanwhile, Evelyn coordinated with Marjorie to leak select details to trusted journalists. She arranged for the fundraiser's guest list to include top-tier members of the press, those who wouldn't ignore a juicy scandal should one unfold before them. At the same time, Allen reached out to contacts in the financial sector, quietly preparing for a fallout that might shake Moretti Holdings, depending on how Thomas reacted. Evelyn even contacted Marcus Holland one last time to ensure the background documents were airtight. If she tries to deny anything, she told him, "I want every piece of evidence lined up and ready to go." The night before the fundraiser, Evelyn stood before her closet, choosing her armor. She selected a midnight blue gown, sleek and commanding. Her hair was styled into an elegant updo, her makeup polished with just enough edge to convey power. Every detail from her heels to her earrings was curated not just to impress, but to reclaim the narrative. As she stepped into the chauffeured car the next evening, clutching her clutch with the final printed files nestled inside, Evelyn stared at the Manhattan skyline. A city of illusions and empires where fortunes were made and destroyed in whispers. Tonight she would do more than reveal a fraud. She would remind everyone, including Thomas, that no one dismisses Evelyn Moretti and walks away unscathed. And Samantha, she was about to learn the cost of stealing a queen's crown without earning the throne. The night of the Children's Hope Fund Gala shimmered with opulence and unspoken tension. The grand foyer of the Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed beneath cascading crystal chandeliers, echoing with the soft rustle of couture gowns and murmurs of Manhattan's elite. It was an evening designed to celebrate generosity, but for Evelyn Moretti it would serve a far more personal purpose, justice cloaked in elegance. Paparazzi crowded behind velvet ropes as black cars rolled up the steps. When Thomas Moretti stepped out with Samantha Caldwell on his arm, camera flashes burst like fireworks. Samantha wore an ivory gown that hugged her curves and sparkled under the museum lights, her expression smug with the certainty that she now belonged in Evelyn's world. Thomas wore his tailored tuxedo like armor, unaware that he was leading his mistress into a trap. Minutes later, Evelyn arrived in a custom midnight blue gown that glittered like starlight against her skin. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. She moved with deliberate grace, each step measured. Her expression was unreadable, a masterwork of serenity. Inside her clutch was a USB drive and printed dossiers that would detonate a social bomb. As the evening unfolded, Evelyn greeted philanthropists, CEOs, and dignitaries with polished charm. She noticed Samantha smiling too brightly for the cameras, clearly relishing her stolen spotlight. Evelyn also noticed the unease in Thomas's eyes. He was keeping a facade, but something about the night's energy had begun to unsettle him. When the time came for speeches, Evelyn took the stage with poised confidence. A hush fell across the atrium. The stage lights cast a soft halo around her, highlighting the subtle steel in her gaze. "Good evening," she began, her voice smooth and deliberate. "Tonight we gather to support children whose voices are often unheard, whose struggles go unseen. We come together to give them hope." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd until they landed squarely on Thomas and Samantha. But it's not just children who suffer when deceit goes unchecked. Our community, our families, and our businesses suffer too when we allow liars and imposters into our inner circles. A few guests shifted in their seats. "I never imagined," she continued, "that someone so calculated, could manipulate not only a man I once trusted, but an entire philanthropic organization. A murmur rippled through the audience. Journalists reached for pens. Evelyn gave a small nod to her assistant, who quietly distributed manila envelopes to members of the press seated discreetly near the front. These documents, Evelyn said, her voice unwavering, prove that Samantha Caldwell is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Jillian Stanton, a con artist with a long history of fraud, financial exploitation, and multiple pending charges in other states. Gasps echoed. The crowd turned collectively to stare at Samantha. The color drained from her face. Thomas stiffened, his mouth opening slightly in horror. "Tonight I did not come to embarrass anyone," Evelyn said, softening only slightly. "I came to protect what matters. My family, my legacy, and the integrity of every organization this woman has tried to infiltrate." Thomas took a step toward Evelyn, but she raised a hand gently to stop him. The room was frozen in stunned silence, the power dynamic visibly shifting. Samantha, trembling, tried to speak, but words failed her. The press had already begun flipping through the documents, cameras clicking frantically. As security approached, Samantha Thomas stood in stunned silence. The mask had fallen. The mistress had been unmasked. Evelyn turned to the crowd, her voice calm and resolute. "Let this be a reminder to us all. Deception may glitter, but truth endures. And when the time is right, it shines brighter than any lie." With that, she descended the stage, not as a victim, but as a force of reckoning. Evelyn Moretti had reclaimed her place, not beside a man, but above betrayal itself. The moment Evelyn stepped off the stage, the grand hall of the Metropolitan Museum of Art erupted into chaos. Murmurs turned into gasps, and gasps turned into a frenzied swarm of whispers, camera clicks, and raised voices. Flash bulbs pulsed like lightning, catching every angle of Samantha Caldwell's, no Jillian Stanton's, ashen face. Evelyn walked past them all like a queen descending from her throne, not glancing back even once at the woman who had tried to usurp her life. She had said what needed to be said, and done so in a language Manhattan's elite understood: cold facts, legal evidence, and public humiliation delivered with class. Samantha stood frozen for several seconds before she seemed to realize what had just happened. She reached for Thomas's arm, but he stepped away, his expression dazed. A photographer caught that exact moment, her desperate fingers grasping at air, and Thomas's hollow stare pointed somewhere far beyond her. That image would appear on the front page of the New York Post the next morning, captioned, "The Undoing of a Con Queen." Security, already briefed by Marjorie Henderson, moved in. A quiet but firm exchange followed. Samantha tried to protest, her voice rising into a frantic shriek that cut through the museum's marble halls. "This is slander. This is a setup." But no one was listening. The press had already received the documents with every sordid detail, her former aliases, her criminal record, and her well-documented trail of deception. There would be no escape this time. She was escorted out the side entrance, away from the gala, away from the cameras, though they still followed her, capturing the tears streaking through her makeup, the designer heels catching awkwardly on the cobblestone. The empire she thought she'd claimed had vanished in an instant. Back inside, Thomas remained rooted near the sculpture gallery. People stared but kept a respectful distance. He looked broken, less the suave mogul, and more like a man whose entire reality had been turned inside out. Slowly he turned toward Evelyn, who now stood quietly near the bar, accepting congratulations from donors and longtime friends who had seen the spectacle unfold. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment there was silence between them. Two people once so close, now fractured by betrayal, pride, and the weight of their choices. Later that night, after the museum had emptied and the press had retreated to publish their stories, Thomas found Evelyn outside, standing on the stone balcony that overlooked Central Park. The wind tugged gently at her hair. She didn't turn when he approached. "I didn't know," he said at last, his voice rough with disbelief. "I swear to you, Evelyn, I didn't know what she was." Evelyn stayed quiet for a long moment before answering. No, you didn't, but you knew what I was, and you still chose her. Thomas winced. I was a fool. I thought I was, I don't know, reclaiming something. Youth. Power. You were always the stronger one, and he stopped himself. I lost sight of everything. You didn't just lose sight, Evelyn said, turning to face him. You erased me from your will. You let her walk into our company, our lives, as if I had never been there. He lowered his gaze, guilt writ large on his face. It was a mistake, a catastrophic one. I see that now. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I really am. I don't need your apology, she said, her voice softer than before. What I need is stability for Daniel, and for the company. If you want redemption, start there. Thomas nodded solemnly. I will. In the days that followed, the fallout played out on every media outlet. New York Magazine ran a full expose titled Mistress Mogul and the Woman Who Outsmarted Them, both praising Evelyn for her composed takedown and her commitment to preserving the integrity of Moretti Holdings. Stock prices dipped briefly but rebounded quickly. Investors appreciated decisive leadership, and Evelyn had proven herself a fortress of reason amid a scandalous storm. Samantha, or rather Jillian Stanton, vanished into custody, her legal team scrambling to contain the damage. Ex-partners from several states began reaching out to prosecutors. The woman who had once navigated courtrooms with charm and deception now faced federal charges that would likely result in prison time. She wouldn't be returning to the luxury scene anytime soon, if ever. Meanwhile, the board of Moretti Holdings convened an emergency session. Alan Pierce, Evelyn's ally, presented a dossier proving her strategic contributions to the company in recent months. Several members, privately tired of Thomas's erratic behavior and public embarrassment, voted unanimously to reinstate Evelyn with enhanced authority. In a historic move, she was granted co-executive power and additional controlling shares, effectively placing her at the helm. In a rare show of contrition, Thomas stepped forward voluntarily and offered to transfer additional voting rights to Evelyn. This company exists because of you, he admitted before the board. I lost sight of that. She didn't. It was not a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. Evelyn accepted the shares, not out of sentiment, but as a means to protect what she had built. At home, the atmosphere shifted. Thomas moved into a separate apartment downtown, giving Evelyn and Daniel space. Though awkward at first, the separation allowed for healing. Evelyn focused on strengthening her relationship with their son, re-establishing routines that had been strained during the chaos. Daniel, intuitive and sensitive, asked fewer questions now. Evelyn made sure he never overheard another fight. One afternoon, while helping him with a school project about family trees, he pointed at a picture of Evelyn and said, "You're the roots, aren't you, Mom?" Her heart squeezed. "Why do you say that?" "Because you held everything together." She kissed the top of his head, blinking back tears. "That's my job, sweetheart." In the weeks that followed, Evelyn finalized the remaining legal restructuring. Every document Thomas had once updated behind her back was now reviewed, rewritten, and fortified. Her name was restored and expanded on every will, trust, and corporate file. She wasn't just reclaiming her seat at the table. She was rebuilding the entire house brick by strategic brick. The whisper campaign that Alan had initiated earlier became a proud chorus. Other real estate magnates, hedge fund leaders, and even nonprofit directors began publicly voicing their support for Evelyn. She was invited to speak on panels about leadership betrayal in corporate spaces and the strength of female executives. She didn't share everything, but what she did share struck chords across industries. 1 month after the gala, Evelyn sat in the corner office of Moretti Holdings headquarters, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, older, wiser, and finally at peace. Marjorie entered with coffee and a thick envelope. "It's done," she said. "Everything's updated. Legally, financially, you're covered." Evelyn took the cup with a small smile. "Thank you, Marjorie, for everything." "You earned this," Marjorie replied. You didn't just survive the storm, you turned it into a lesson. As the sun dipped low over the Hudson, Evelyn turned her chair to the window and exhaled. She had lost her illusions, her marriage, and her sense of invincibility. But she had gained clarity, autonomy, and a legacy stronger than ever before. The phrase that had once haunted her mistress, "replaced her in his will," no longer had power over her, because now she had replaced him on every legal document. And she had done it not for revenge, but for rebirth. For those watching this whirlwind tale, remember, no matter how dark betrayal's shadow may loom, there is always a way to reclaim your power. Evelyn's journey through heartache, cunning adversaries, and corporate showdowns is a reminder that resilience, knowledge, and courage can overcome the most devastating deceptions. She didn't just defend what was hers, she elevated herself to new heights. If you found suspense and inspiration in Evelyn's story, show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with fellow drama lovers, and subscribing to our channel for more gripping real-life tales. Every gesture, from a click to a comment, helps us bring you more enthralling stories. Join our community, and together let's continue exploring the human passions, pitfalls, and triumphs that color our world. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay strong, and keep writing your own powerful chapters in life's story.